full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
Every morning.
Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, so we got a jam-packed show for you. Welcome to the program. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to try to listen to some Johnny Cash music while at the same time, well, it's more going to be like an avalanche of news today, folks. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States spoke to the Woodrow Wilson Center and gave another, it's been about a year since he gave his speech at the Hudson Institute on U.S.-China relations and the danger of China. Now, I want you to keep in mind, we're going to listen to a lot of this speech this hour. We got 3 guests on the program today, so we're going to have to keep up. But this is so significant if you are an Arkansan and if you understand that our governor and the economic development philosophy for this state has been to do business with the communist Chinese, then, you know, you really start to realize there's something very wrong here. These deals don't need to happen. I know one of them was announced today or yesterday or 2 days ago in Jonesboro. There was an opening there, but there are these other deals that are potentially happening. Don't take my word for it. Let's listen. Here's the Vice President of the United States. Here's Mike Pence, and this is what he said yesterday.
These are all historic actions. And no president before has so vigorously advanced America's interests in our relationship with China. In response to America's actions and resolve, some multinational corporations say our economic policies are too tough and that advancing our interests and our values runs contrary to better relations with China. Needless to say, we see it very differently. Despite the great power competition that is underway and America's growing strength, we want better for China. That's why, for the first time in decades, under President Donald Trump's leadership, the United States is treating China's leaders exactly how the leaders of any great world power should be treated. With respect, yes, but also with consistency and candor. And in that spirit of candor, I must tell you that in the years since my Hudson speech, Beijing has still not taken significant action to improve our economic relationship. And on many other issues we raised, Beijing's behavior has become even more aggressive and destabilizing. On the trade front this past May, after months of painstaking negotiations, resulted in mutual agreement on many key matters, at the last moment, China backed away. Backed away from a 150-page agreement, sending both sides back to square one. Now, President Trump still believes Beijing wants to make a deal. And we welcome the support for American agriculture in the new Phase 1 agreement and hope it can be signed soon at the APEC summit in Chile this week. But China knows there's a whole range of structural and significant issues between our two countries that also must be addressed. For instance, despite a 2015 promise in the Rose Garden by China's leader to cease and desist, China continues to aid and abet the theft of our intellectual property. Last July, the director of the FBI told Congress that of his agency's 1,000 active investigations into intellectual property theft, the majority involve China. American enterprises continue to lose hundreds of billions of dollars each year in intellectual property theft.
The majority of our economic development deals
statistics
are with China here in
not
Arkansas.
Just businesses, but people. families, dreams threatened by the violation of their rights and the theft of their genius. Free enterprise depends on the ability of risk-taking citizens to pursue their ambitions and reap the rewards of their sacrifice. When the product of their labor is stolen, when the sweat of their brow is made futile, it undermines our entire system of free enterprise. Last year alone, there's been case after case of intellectual property theft involving China. In March, Tesla filed suit against a former engineer who's been accused of stealing 300,000 files related to its own American-developed autopilot system before bolting for a job at a Chinese self-driving car company. And last December, the Justice Department revealed that it had broken up a nearly 4-year operation by a notorious hacking group within China's Ministry of State Security. These Chinese government officials stole the names and data of 100,000 U.S. Navy personnel, as well as ship maintenance information with grave implications for our national security. Despite China's promises to crack down on Chinese fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, the truth is those deadly drugs also continue to flood across our borders, claiming the lives of thousands of Americans every month. And today, China's Communist Party is building a surveillance state unlike anything the world has ever seen. Hundreds of millions of surveillance cameras stare down from every vantage point. Ethnic minorities must navigate arbitrary checkpoints where police demand blood samples, fingerprints, voice recordings, and multiple angle headshots and even iris scans. And China is now exporting to countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East the very same technological tools that it uses in its authoritarian regime.
To enslave its citizens
Tools
further.
that it's deployed in places like Xinjiang. Tools that it's deployed often with the help of American companies. And Beijing has also smashed the barriers between civilian and military technological domains. A doctrine that China calls the military-civilian fusion. By law and presidential fiat, companies in China, whether private, state-owned, or foreign, must share their technologies with the Chinese military. And China's military action in the region and its approach to its neighbors over the past year has also remained increasingly provocative. While China's leader stood in the Rose Garden in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases
now
constructed on artificial islands.
That's an exact quote from his old speech from the Hudson
And Beijing
Institute.
has stepped up its use of what they call maritime militia vessels to regularly menace Filipino, Malaysian sailors and fishermen. And the Chinese Coast Guard has tried to strong-arm Vietnam from drilling for oil and natural gas off of Vietnam's own shores. In the East China Sea, in 2019, our close ally Japan is on track to scramble more fighter aircraft sorties in response to Chinese provocation than in any previous year in history. And China's Coast Guard has sent ships for more than 60 days in a row into the waters around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan.
Al on Facebook. Thank goodness.
China's also using its One Belt, One Road initiative.
Thank goodness Asa is
to
so much
establish
smarter than our
footholds in
vice
ports around
president.
the
Al
world.
on Facebook writes.
Ostensibly for commercial purposes, but those purposes could eventually become military. We see now the flag of Chinese ownership flying today in ports from Sri Lanka to Pakistan to Greece. And earlier this year, it was reported that Beijing has signed a secret agreement to establish a naval base in Cambodia. And it is reported that Beijing is even eyeing locations on the Atlantic Ocean that could serve as naval facilities.
Probably Greenland, which is why we're probably going to buy it.
And While our administration will continue to respect the One China policy as reflected in the 3 joint communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act, through checkbook diplomacy, over the past year, China has induced 2 more nations to switch diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing, increasing pressure on the democracy in Taiwan. The international community must never forget that its engagement with Taiwan does not threaten the peace. It protects peace on Taiwan and throughout the region. America will always believe that Taiwan's embrace of democracy shows a better path for all the Chinese people. But nothing in the past year has put on display the Chinese Communist Party's antipathy to liberty so much as the unrest in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has served as an important gateway between China and the wider world for 150 years. Hong Kong is one of the freest economies in the world, with strong, independent legal institutions and a lively free press, and it's home to hundreds of thousands of foreign residents. Hong Kong is a living example of what can happen when China embraces liberty. And yet, for the last few years, Beijing has increased its interventions in Hong Kong and engaged in actions to curtail the rights and liberties of its people. Rights and liberties that were guaranteed through a binding international agreement of one country, 2 systems. But President Trump has been clear. As he said in his words, the United States stands for liberty.
What does Arkansas
We respect
stand
the
for?
sovereignty of nations. But America also expects Beijing to honor its commitments. And President Trump has repeatedly made it clear that it would be much harder for us to make a trade deal if the authorities resort to the use of violence against protesters in Hong Kong. Since then, I'm pleased to observe that Hong Kong authorities have withdrawn the extradition bill that sparked the protests in the first place, and Beijing has shown some restraint. In the days ahead, I can assure you, the United States will continue to urge China to show restraint, to honor its commitments, and respect the people of Hong Kong. To the millions in Hong Kong who have been peacefully demonstrating to protect your rights these past months, we stand with you. We are inspired by you, and we urge you to stay on the path of nonviolent protest. But know that you have the prayers and the admiration of millions of Americans. As China has exercised its influence across the region and across the world, as I said last year, the Chinese Communist Party is also continuing to reward and coerce American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks,
wait for it,
scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials to influence the public debate here in America. Today, China is not only exporting hundreds of billions of dollars in unfairly traded goods to the United States, but lately, China has also been trying to export censorship, the hallmark of its regime, by exploiting corporate greed. Beijing is attempting to influence American public opinion, coercing corporate America. And far too many American multinational corporations have kowtowed to the lure of China's money and markets by muzzling not only criticism of the Chinese Communist Party, but even affirmative expressions of American values. Nike promotes itself as a so-called social justice champion, But when it comes to Hong Kong, it prefers checking its social conscience at the door. Nike stores in China actually removed their Houston Rockets merchandise from their shelves to join the Chinese government in protest against the Rockets general manager's 7-word tweet, which read, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." And some of the NBA's biggest players and owners who routinely exercise their freedom to criticize this country lose their voices when it comes to the freedom and rights of the people of China.
Shameful.
In siding with the Chinese Communist Party and silencing free speech, the NBA is acting like a wholly owned subsidiary of that authoritarian regime. A progressive corporate culture that willfully ignores the abuse of human rights is not progressive, it is repressive.
Yeah. What's Arkansas ignoring?
When American
Are we ignoring
corporations,
anything
professional sports, pro athletes embrace censorship, it's not just wrong, it's un-American. American corporations should stand up for American values here at home and around the world.
All right, stop right there. We're going to break for 1 minute. 1 minute. Be back in just a moment. More from this speech. It was fantastic. Vice President Mike Pence once again articulating the dangers of China, and it stands in stark contrast to what the government of Arkansas is doing, putting all of our economic development eggs in essentially one basket of doing business with the Communist Chinese, recruiting their communist entities disguised as companies to Arkansas. Back in a moment.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown 9-fold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation. All
right, here we are. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Conduit News. It's Friday, Johnny Cash Friday. We're in the middle of listening to Vice President Mike Pence's new speech that he gave yesterday at the Woodrow Wilson Center. And let's pick back up where we left off. And telling you, the whole time you're listening to this, you think, why is Arkansas continuing to recruit Chinese businesses or continuing to pursue these deals with the Communist Chinese government? Go ahead.
Beijing's economic and strategic actions, its attempts to shape American public opinion, prove out what I said a year ago. That's just as true today. China wants a different American president, which is the ultimate proof that President Trump's leadership is working. America's economy is growing stronger by the day, and China's economy is paying the price. The president's strategy is correct. He's fighting for the American people, for American jobs and American workers like no president has before. And I promise you, this administration will not stand down. That said, the president has also made it clear the United States does not seek confrontation with China. We seek a level playing field, open markets, fair trade, and a respect for our values. We are not seeking to contain China's development. We want a constructive relationship with China's leaders, like we have enjoyed for generations with China's people. And if China will step forward and seize this unique moment in history to start anew by ending the trade practices that have taken advantage of the American people for far too long, I know President Donald Trump is ready and willing to begin that new future. Just as America has done in the past. When Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening policy encouraged engagement and exchange with the outside world, the United States responded with open arms. We welcomed China's rise. We celebrated the remarkable accomplishment of 600 million people lifting themselves out of poverty. And America invested more than any other nation in China's economic resurgence. The American people want better for the people of China. But in pursuit of that end, we must take China as it is, not as we imagine or hope it might be someday.
I hope the governor's listening.
People sometimes ask whether the Trump administration seeks to decouple from China. The answer is a resounding no. The United States seeks engagement with China and China's engagement with the wider world, but engagement in a manner consistent with fairness, mutual respect, and the international rules of commerce. But so far, it appears the Chinese Communist Party continues to resist a true opening or a convergence with global norms. All that Beijing is doing today, from the party's great firewall in cyberspace or to that great wall of sand in the South China Sea, from their distrust of Hong Kong's autonomy or the repression of people of faith, all demonstrate that it's the Chinese Communist Party that has been decoupling from the wider world.
Yeah.
For decades.
That's exactly right.
President Xi himself, I'm told, said in a once secret speech shortly after his rise as party general secretary that China must conscientiously prepare for all aspects of long-term cooperation and struggle between the two social systems. He also told his colleagues at that time not to underestimate the resilience of the West. And there was wisdom in those words. China should never underestimate the resilience of the freedom-loving people of America or the resolve of the President of the United States.
All right, we are up against a hard break. We're going to continue with this closer to the top of the hour. We've got Dr. Paul Nathanson coming up on the program. We're going to talk about James Younger, this boy in Texas whose mom wants to chemically castrate him, essentially. We're going to talk about that next, but what a stark contrast. The economic development policy of the state of Arkansas and Governor Asa Hutchinson and Arkansas Secretary of Commerce Mike Preston in stark contrast with the Vice President of the United States, the Trump administration, and everything they're trying to do on China. We must deal with China the way they are, not the way we imagine them to be. Clearly, according to quotes from Talk Business and Politics, Asa believes that these Chinese companies are just like anybody, other companies. They're just investors, and he's ignoring the fact that they're communists and they're loyal to the communist government of China.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Li to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Li and I met yesterday. Chairman Li indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses.
It is Johnny Cash Friday. We'll try to continue to listen to as much Cash music as we can. We'll at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. But I've got to tell you, we got a lot of news to get to today. A lot of stuff that's going on. And we'll pick back up with that speech about China from Vice President Mike Pence here in just a moment. We gave you this story at the beginning of the week about a judge ruling that James Younger is going to stay with his mom, who wants to basically give him hormone blockers and chemically castrate this young man named James. His father obviously reached out to the media. You also have a judge yesterday, I think the same judge, saying, no, the mother and the father will have to be able to agree on whatever decisions that they make with regard to hormone blockers. And so that's certainly a positive development. I'd like to start with this video, though. Just real quick, I want you to understand, this is a video of James Younger talking to his dad, and just listen to this.
You're a boy, right?
No, I'm a girl.
Who told you you were a girl?
Mommy.
When did she tell you you were a girl?
'Cause I love girls.
Oh, I see. So mommy told you you were a girl?
Uh-huh.
Does mommy do anything else like with a girl with you?
Mm-hmm.
Like what?
Like dresses.
What does she do?
Dresses.
She do put them on me.
She puts dresses on you? Oh, wow.
All right, stop.
And what
I
else
want to
does
bring
she do?
in Dr. Paul Nathanson. He's a gender relations professor. He's defined the field of misandry in our culture. He's the author of Spreading Misandry, the Teaching of Contempt of Men in Popular Culture. Dr. Nathanson, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. By the way, there are 4 books in the Misandry series, and my co-author is Catherine Young.
Okay. Co-author is Catherine Young. What? First of all, I want to get to your books here in a minute. Can I get your response to this story that's, got so many people worried? I mean, first of all, it happened in Texas, and it seems like there's people on the left that believe this is not child abuse.
Well, it clearly is child abuse. I mean, because it's children cannot really give their consent to any of these procedures, and so the fact that the judge now says that both parents should have a say in this matter doesn't mitigate the fact that neither parent should be able to change the sex of their child, if that were possible scientifically, which it's not.
Yeah, that makes an incredible amount of sense, and you're exactly right. I mean, we believe in this country we've got laws that say you can't vote till you're 18, you can't drink till you're 21, you can't drive at a certain age. Why would we? You can't buy cigarettes till you're 18. Why would we not say you're not going to be able to do this to yourself until you're an adult?
Well, I can't answer that because I can't put myself in the head of an irrational person. I mean, basically, regardless of whatever you think about the trans phenomenon from, let's say, a religious or other perspective, scientifically it makes no sense. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's at issue here is not only the authority of parents, the authority of courts, it's also the authority of science. Can we just say that something is A if it's really B?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I've been reading up a lot about this. I mean, we're being asked to participate in people's delusions, people who think they can just define their own reality, that there is no, objective truth or standard. And I think we're really at a crossroads culturally. And, we have people that don't just want to be accepted. They want us to agree with them, and it's a mentality. I believe it's totalitarian. It's not enough anymore to say, hey, I may have different opinions on how I live my life, but you're free to do what you want to do. It's shifted, and now it's like, no, I can't accept if I think there's some thought in your brain that actually disagrees or disapproves of my lifestyle, I can't handle it. And so we need the government to affirm my lifestyle. We need to, in some cases, compel speech. You've got to say these words. You can't say these pronouns. And it's really, I think, a danger to the preservation of Western civilization, quite frankly, Dr. Nathanson. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you. I think the underlying problem is not trans or some other form of identity. It's the whole notion of identity politics. Because it's because of identity politics that people cannot disagree in public. It's considered politically incorrect. You can be sued if you say the wrong thing. So underlying all of this is identity politics, the notion that there's no such thing as an individual, only people who belong to groups. And in this case, the trans group has been very successful in asserting itself as a legitimate category in spite of all the evidence, and also in punishing people who disagree.
Can you talk a little? Let's talk a little bit about your book now. Again, we're talking with Dr. Paul Nathanson. He and Catherine K. Young, co-wrote this book, Spreading Misandry, the Teaching of Contempt for Men in Popular Culture. What can you tell us about that? What made you want to write this book?
Well, I think we had different motivations. Catherine's field, both of us are in religious studies, and Catherine's field within that is India, Indian religions, and she has worked very extensively on women in India. So we got together and we began to see that we both could contribute something to a joint effort, because my field is Western religion, and I'm interested in men. And so we had from that point of view, we had a good combination. Now the problem is that we are having a hard time, even 20 or 30 years after we began our research, we still get hostility. We still get protest demonstrations when we speak at universities. So although the word misandry is now much more common on the internet, partly because of our work, not entirely, people still ask me, well, what on earth is misandry?
Yeah.
Now, how many people would ask what misogyny is?
Interesting. Yeah, no, everybody knows what that is, you know? It's, what is it, toxic masculinity, essentially?
I have a bit of trouble hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm saying is yeah, everybody knows what that is. Everybody knows what a misogynist is. So how are we teaching contempt for men in popular culture today? How do you see that?
Well, that first book, Spreading Misandry, was about popular culture. And we looked at the ways in which men are portrayed in movies, TV shows, news shows, commercials, a whole range of popular culture venues. And we found that men are basically portrayed as being either evil or inadequate, or sometimes token women, honorary women. That's the people who get in that category are people who either demonstrate some feminist perspective, or else they're gay. So that was a pattern. Now that pattern coexists with patterns for women, which are also demeaning. The only difference is that misogyny is closely watched. Okay, we've got many government agencies and private organizations monitoring popular culture for any sign of misogyny, and then protesting. We do have some agencies, not government agencies, but some private organizations that monitor misandry, and there are sites on the internet, you can look that up. But it's still not recognized as something that needs to be taken seriously by academics and therefore by government officials. So, we're basically where women were 60 years ago.
Wow. I mean, there's that is so controversial in terms of, being politically correct. But, I mean, I've thought about this many times. You hear these folks talk about, your toxic masculinity, this and that. And I kind of feel like one of the main problems in our society is that we don't have enough masculinity. We don't have enough men who are embracing, what I would call a traditional role, being protectors, being, chivalrous and everything else. Do you think we actually need more masculinity, not less?
Well, I think we need a notion of masculinity that commands public respect. I don't know whether that notion happens to correspond to anything that you have in mind, because masculinity varies a great deal from one culture to another, and from one period to another, even within the same culture. But I think that it's a necessity in every society to identify men and women in ways that promote interdependence, not autonomy for either, but interdependence, because that's how society works. We need both men and women. Unfortunately, it's now politically incorrect to say that we need men and women. Women want to be autonomous. They want to be able to do and say everything that men can. So they want those privileges, but they don't want the responsibilities that go with it. In any case, the question of what a man is a very, it's more complicated than you might think. It's not a matter of looking at genes or biological differences, although there are some, and important ones. But it's a cultural definition that we live by because we live within culture. That's how we live. We don't live as unthinking organisms. So we have to find a way of helping men be necessary to society. Okay, now that's a problem because at the moment, women, in fact, are doing everything that men do, and therefore the question is, well, then what is a man? And how does a man have a healthy identity? And to have a healthy identity means being able to make at least one contribution to society that is A, necessary, B, distinctive, and C, publicly valued. So that's our problem. That's what I think is the crux of the problem at the moment.
Well, I mean,
it's masculine identity.
Yeah, well, I would agree. And we have, I mean, taking this back to this story this week about James Younger, masculine identity, we have, an activist mom probably trying to just get back at her ex-husband. That's kind of what I think's going on here. And it's like, all right, we're gonna make you a girl, son, and we're gonna dress you in dresses and maybe even talk about chemically blocking hormones. And I'm thankful that the judge came out and said that's not going to happen. But we've got to confront this head on. I mean, I don't even think we can address the issues you're talking about, Dr. Nathanson, until we're willing to say we don't want to experiment on kids. I mean, I remember when. I thought that was something that you would hear about in science fiction movies or something like that. Like, oh, we're just going to experiment. We have no idea the long-term effects.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
We have no idea. And I should say that, I mean, although I don't consider myself trans, I am gay. And so I grew up with having to ask questions about what it meant to be a man. I didn't think that I wasn't going to be a man, but I didn't know what it meant. And so I was certainly confused as a child, and my parents might have said, oh, well, he's really not a boy at all, he's a girl. And I've got to tell you how grateful I am that my parents didn't decide to use surgery and hormone therapy to fix me by turning me into a girl.
We can agree there for sure. And it just kind of shows that this is just gotten way out of hand. But I appreciate having you on, Dr. Paul Nathanson, and I appreciate you talking with us about this issue because, I mean, I think it certainly is something that, I mean, I just don't see how it's Western civilization is going to survive if we can't say, men are men, women are women, and that's just the way it is. I mean, it's a biological fact. It's down to the chromosomes,
Well, for many years, I didn't want to admit that. I thought it was in my interest to make everything up for grabs. But I see now that I was wrong, that there are some things that are just natural, and we have to live with that and find ways of enhancing whoever we are.
I appreciate your time this morning, Dr. Paul Nathanson.
Thank you.
All righty, folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset here, and we are going to get back to this China speech. When we come back, don't go anywhere. It's Conduit News.
Businesses to hand over their trade secrets. as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks so much for being with us, listening. Okay, so we have a very interesting situation right now. Vice President Mike Pence yesterday delivering this Chinese address, okay? And he is this address on China, I mean, and he's echoing much of what was said last year, but even more. And again, it stands in stark contrast with Arkansas's chief economic development philosophy, which is to bring communist companies into Arkansas to do business with. He's already talked about how China is manipulating state and local officials, journalists, Hollywood, big companies like the NBA, using corporate greed. Let's continue with this, with what time we have left in this hour.
China should know that the United States values run deep, that our commitment to these values remains as strong as it was for our founding fathers, and that there will never be a day when the bright light of democracy and freedom goes out in America. America was born out of rebellion against repression and tyranny. Our nation was founded, settled, and pioneered by men and women of extraordinary valor, rugged determination, faith, fiery independence, and an iron will. And nothing's changed much in the centuries that have passed. Americans believe that all men and women are created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And nothing will change these beliefs.
Yep. Nothing will change it.
They are who we are.
Mm-hmm.
They are who we will always be.
Yeah. But what about Arkansas, though?
And we will continue to believe that the values of democracy, of individual liberty, freedom of religion and conscience, the rule of law, serve American and global interests because they are and will ever be the best form of government to unleash human aspirations and guide the relations between all the world's nations and peoples. Despite the many challenges we face in the United States-China relationship, I can assure you that under the leadership of President Donald Trump, the United States will not allow these challenges to foreclose practical cooperation with China. We will continue to negotiate in good faith with China to bring about long overdue structural reforms in our economic relationship. And as I heard again from him this morning, President Trump remains optimistic that an agreement can be reached. We'll continue to forge bonds between our two peoples through education, travel, and cultural exchange. China and the United States will also continue in a spirit of engagement to work together to secure the full, final, verifiable denuclearization of North Korea. And we will see greater cooperation on arms control and the enforcement of U.S. sanctions in the Persian Gulf. America will continue to seek a better relationship with China. And as we do so, we will speak plainly, because this is a relationship that both the United States and China have to get right. America will continue to seek a fundamental restructuring of our relationship with China.
Wow, a fundamental restructuring.
And under the leadership of President Donald Trump, America will stay the course. The American people and their elected officials in both parties will stay resolved. We will defend our interests, we will defend our values, and we will do so in a spirit of charity and goodwill for all. President Trump has forged a strong personal relationship with President Xi. And on that foundation, we will continue to look for ways to strengthen our relationship for the betterment of both of our peoples. We fervently believe the United States and China can and must work to share a peaceful and prosperous future together. But only honest dialogue and good faith negotiations can make that future a reality. And so as I closed my speech a year ago, so I close today. America is reaching out our hand to China. And we hope that soon Beijing will reach back, this time with deeds, not words.
Stop. Well,
and
they're,
with renewed
I'll tell you
respect.
this much, they're reaching into Arkansas, we're reaching into our pockets right now, and we've got leaders that are allowing it. A fundamental restructuring of our relationship with China, as the Vice President said. Something tells me these economic development deals are not part of that equation, not anytime soon.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want To support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. You know, I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. You know, we need people who, in the presidency, that understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or coercing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a taxpayer...
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks. Hey, welcome back to the program. We do have with us once again, we've got Conduit contributor Hannah Webb Howard is back with us. Hannah, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's always great to talk to you. Now, I want to remind our listeners, I'm sure they are very familiar with you at this point because you've guest hosted the program, but you are a student in law school here in Arkansas. Last time we had you on a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about starting a Second Amendment society. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so first of all, we have had an absolutely overwhelming response, which has surprised me, so I'm sure it would surprise all your listeners. So just background on what the group is. It's the Second Amendment Society, but when I introduced the group in the interest meeting and emails I send out, the very first point I want to make is, listen, this is not some gun nut group, organization with people, with 10 guns on their hips, walking around with AK-47. By all means, if you are that person, this is the group for you, but that's not the kind of image I want to portray. I want it to be a very inclusive, welcoming group because we want to be more of an educational outreach for people. So we want to say, hey, we're gun owners. We shoot guns. We own guns. We carry our guns responsibly. And so if you've never shot a gun, or if you don't understand guns, or if you don't know the difference between a .22 and an AR-15 and a handgun, well, then we want to be that group to teach you the difference and then allow you a place to learn how to shoot the gun, learn how to properly handle the gun. Here's how a safety works, or, here's how the safety works on this gun, and here's the gun. For example, I have a Glock, and if you know anything about a Glock, in mine specifically, it doesn't necessarily have a safety, but the trigger itself is a safety feature, and that's something that a layperson isn't going to know or understand, and that's very valuable information if you are going to own a gun. And so we want our group to be, hey, you may think we're a gun nut, and that may be true, but I want to be non-intimidating to you and just a normal person and teach you that these things aren't as scary as what you think.
Well, and I'm glad that you're doing that, and I think that is a strategic approach, the approach that you're using, because we are talking about people who want to be a bunch of attorneys. And the fact of the matter is, Hannah, most attorneys are big leftists, and they don't really understand. They don't seem to be conservative a lot of times. And you have people on the left that don't know the difference between, they call a magazine a clip, they think a silencer actually sounds the way it does in a movie. I mean, there's just a ton of misconceptions out there.
Well, and another part of this is, the group that I'm trying to, I'm being very authentic because I'm not somebody who can have a conversation with you about 20 different guns and the different facets of every gun and the differences between all of them. I have my gun. I know how it works. I know how to use it. I know how to properly use it. And I know how to use it if the time ever comes that I ever defend myself. I also know how to use the guns that, I grew up hunting with, rifles or shotguns or whatever. I know how to use those guns. But if you want to sit here and have a very detailed conversation with me about, if we were to go to a gun show, I could not intelligently walk around and discuss every detail of every gun that's there. That's not me. And not that I'm not interested and not that I think it's cool. It's just not necessarily something I actively pursue. And so when I talk about I want to keep my gun rights, I literally just want to walk around, with my gun to protect myself in the grocery store or in Little Rock, because that is where I live. It's a very dangerous place. I want to be able to leave my house, drive down the street, and protect myself. So that's the place that I come from.
Practical
now,
use.
Yeah, and you know, I hope no one would shame me for that, because I think that's very realistic, and that's how most people feel about guns. Even if people are very passive and, you know, they just own a gun in case somebody robs their house, I think across the board it's generally a very practical
of course
idea of how to use a gun. And so the whole thing is coming from a very authentic place for me. You know, for example, we want our group to, like, you know, we're planning an event coming up, our first social event, which is going to be at a gun range. You know, here there's one just outside of Little Rock, super easy access for everyone. Going to go have a little social event at the gun range. Unless something changes between now and then, it'll be the first time I ever go to a gun range. Because when I grew up, I mean, of course I grew up in Paragould, and we live outside city limits on plenty of land that I learned how to shoot guns in my backyard. And so when we wanted to do target practice, you could literally walk out on the deck and shoot your gun. And that's how I learned. That's how I practiced. You know, if a group of friends would get together to go shoot guns, because we did that. That's a very, it may not be a prominent thing here in Little Rock. It's a very prominent thing in Northeast Arkansas to go hang out with your friends and shoot skeet or something along those natures. Yeah, it's seriously.
Yeah.
And so we would just go to somebody's farm, somebody's hunting land, and shoot off the levee or shoot in the field. So that's how I grew up with guns. And so I think if anything, I think it helps that I'm coming from a genuine place of I can identify with all you people who may not, you know, understand everything that's going on. Because when I walk into this gun range, I'm going to have to be very raw with these people and be like, listen, you need to, like, teach me the proper etiquette in the gun range. You know, hopefully I can look to someone and be like, hey,
absolutely,
I'm the leader of this group, but I'm learning with you.
Yeah.
And so that's the baseline of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, that's good. I think that's fantastic. You know, in the midst of a law school, and we know, you know, law schools tend to teach more case law than Constitution, or at least that's what I've been told. I mean, I still know you take classes on the Constitution and everything else. But, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Hannah Webb Howard, Conduit contributor. Hannah, I sent you this story. I'd like to get your opinion on it. It's from the Daily Wire, and we talked about it earlier in the week. Jury rules against Texas dad fighting 7-year-old son's gender transition. Did you see the story?
I did see the story.
Well, what are we going to do? I mean, you know, as a young conservative yourself, I mean, what is going on with this? I mean, this is something that, you know, it just keeps coming up in the headlines more and more. People trying to alter the chemistry of their children before they hit puberty. I mean, to me, I believe it's child abuse, but we have states affirming this now.
The whole conversation and the whole issue is very hard for me to grasp that we're even having this conversation, and not in, you know, a hateful, malicious way towards people who may genuinely be struggling with this. I don't know. I certainly don't struggle with it, so I can't. You know, if this is a real struggle for people, I don't know if that's why. But it's very mind-blowing to me that, you know, even when I was growing up, this is not a conversation that we would have had. This is not a conversation that I would have had in middle school. It's not something I would have been exposed to middle school, and that was not that long ago. And so it's mind-blowing to me that that's how it's shifted in what I consider to be a short period of time. And then, you know, even apart from the politics of it, you know, of course I am a Christian, and those are the ideals and the foundation that come first in my life. And I think it's a very hard conversation to have even as a Christian, because of course, you know, if you were going to have that genuine conversation with a person, you don't ever want to come off, you know, preaching the hellfire and brimstone, because that's, of course, going to turn somebody off immediately. And so you want to come at it as a place of, you know, loving, understanding, but like, hey, I don't agree with you, and here's why. You know, let's have this loving conversation. You know, where do you even begin to have that conversation with this topic? And it's been so pressurized to be so politically correct that you have to tiptoe around what can I say and what can't I say. So that's a whole part of the conversation that I don't even know how to begin
Yeah.
to address.
Well, I mean,
Well, and
walking on eggshells is certainly a thing that's happening now. I had an experience at the drive-thru the other day where I misgendered somebody. Actually, I didn't. I mean, I gendered them correctly.
oh no.
But then, anyway, it was interesting. But I mean, with the courts, I mean, this father, for example, every single day, you have to see your son sexually abused, and you have to maintain your calm because the courts are not going to be fair to you. And the only way you can survive this and get your son through this alive is to calmly allow your son to be tortured right before your eyes and outlast the opposition. That's what this is like. And I'm thinking as a dad, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you can do this. I mean, how in the world is this something that is going on? And he also have this testimony that he's witnessed his ex-wife only giving the child love and affection when he's acting like a girl, then he gets the affection. I mean, so it is very much abuse, but it's being affirmed across the country. And this particular child uses the women's bathroom and everything else. Have you ever had? Let me ask you this, Hannah. Have you ever had that experience where you walk into a bathroom and it's like, what's going on here?
So I actually have. I am currently in my 6th year of higher education. And, of course, and I'm not saying that it may not happen in high schools, too, but I experienced it during my higher education career. There was a man who identifies as female, whether or not they have, had the physical transition, I'm not sure. But, yeah, there have been multiple times. And it's just one of those things where I have to use the bathroom with them. And not that anything has ever, happened to make me feel uncomfortable apart from the fact that I know that I'm in there with a born man, and nothing's ever happened. I've never been in any,
but it's something, it's
strange
a reality.
scenario beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But it genuinely is a reality. And, because here in Arkansas, especially, when I was still living in Harrell and Jonesboro, you don't really... You see these things and you think they're happening in New York and whatever. You can live with that because it's not at home. But the truth is, I mean, this has happened to me in Arkansas. It's happened right here at home. And so it is coming is what I'm saying. And, you mentioned, it's really hard for you as a dad to sit here and read that story. Well, I don't have children, but I am of childbearing years, and eventually it's going to happen. And my children are going to be raised, and yours too, where we have to have these genuine conversations with them in middle school.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up. My parents didn't have that conversation with me because they didn't have to. So I don't know how I'm supposed to turn around and have that conversation with a 7, 8-year-old who barely understands that, what puberty is.
Yep.
And how do you have that conversation with them? I do not know. I do not know.
I don't know. You maybe having a middle school conversation at home in a home school. I mean, that's what I've considered, just because I'm thinking, I just don't know what to do about it, because there is such a, I feel like you have a responsibility as a parent, to kind of look out, in the future and see these things. But as far as this dad is concerned, I'm not sure why he hasn't gone to some, and I know this is a terrible thing to say, but like looking at non-extradition countries at this point, because I mean, if you were to witness this type of abuse and your own government is sanctioning it, I mean, I know that's not the answer, but my goodness, I feel so terrible for all these children, and we're now going to start saying that this is okay to do these hormone blockers. And, occasionally you'll have a celebrity or something. I think like Mario Lopez from Saved by the Bell, he came out and he said, yeah, I think that's wrong to give somebody hormone blockers before they're even at puberty. They don't even know what they want yet. And apparently this guy actually, his mom decided to let him start to transition because he wanted a McDonald's toy that was for females. And so, then of course the celebrity gets hammered. Mario Lopez just absolutely was destroyed, had to come out and apologize. And it's like, wow. I mean, there's no room for common sense. And so it's definitely going to be a very rocky road. And I'm curious, Hannah, as a law student, are you following this? I understand there's going to be a Supreme Court ruling on something concerning transgenderism, right?
Sure. So there's a case that is up before Supreme Court now regarding transgender rights. But the difference between, so you remember when I think it was back in 2015, when the Supreme Court upheld gay marriage as a constitutional right.
Yeah.
And so with that being a constitutional right, it changes the way that the government can regulate it, if they can regulate it at all. And so it's like the highest form of the government can't touch this that the Supreme Court can give, the fact that they said no, it's in the Constitution. And this case is a Title VII case, which is just a statute, so it's just a law. And so when they decide this case, it isn't necessarily going to be the same type of constitutional case that was decided with gay marriage. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that case is coming, but just be aware that when that holding comes out, it's a little bit different of a situation than what happened with gay marriage. But depending on how that case turns out, it's either going to be, a huge victory for advocates for transgender rights, or it's not. And so we shall see. And I think that case, and I don't know specifically if I'm wrong, I'm terribly sorry, but I think it's going to be decided this year. So we'll know something fairly quickly on it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. What they're essentially arguing, just looking over what I'm looking at right now, at issues whether the gay and transgender people are covered by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bars employers from discriminating against employees on the basis of sex as well as race, color, and national origin. That's what's interesting is okay, well, how are we going to define sex? Number one, because according to the trans community, sex is something that's gender is now a choice, and not something that you're hardwired at, which is very, very strange. But also, I don't think it has anything to do with race, because with race, you can't really hide what you look like, but you don't necessarily know, nor do I want to know when I meet somebody for the first time, what they do in their bedroom or what their preferences are in that way. So we'll see what happens with it. But Hannah, it's always great to talk to you. I really appreciate you giving us your opinions and thoughts, and way to go on that Second Amendment Society. That's a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's always great to be with you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown 9-fold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement
folks.
with
Welcome
you.
back to the program. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We appreciate it. For those of you who missed the first hour, we spent most of the first hour covering this speech yesterday from Vice President Mike Pence. It's basically a sequel to the one he gave about a year ago from the Hudson Institute. This one was from the Woodrow Wilson Center. Once again, coming out very forceful against China and their practices. And, it really once again, is in stark contrast to what we are doing here in the state of Arkansas, welcoming the communist Chinese. We are dismissing the warnings from Arkansas Congressman Rick Crawford, who sits on the Intelligence Committee in the House, saying we can't trust China. It's a Trojan horse. We're dismissing him. The governor of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, they seem to just be like, no, we know better. And not only do we know better than Congressman Rick Crawford, we know better than Vice President Mike Pence, we know better than President Trump, and it's just very, very embarrassing. That's all I can say, is that I am so embarrassed that the fact of the matter is, if Hillary Clinton were elected president, these communist Chinese companies would all be here at this point open for business. And right now, a lot of them are on hold. We don't know if they're all going to materialize, but one of them had a ribbon cutting ceremony just this week on Wednesday. Had a ribbon cutting ceremony. It's very frustrating. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking with Tom Tancredo, former congressman from Colorado, about building the wall. Here's the thing. This is a huge report from Breitbart News. This is going on. This is going everywhere. The Department of Justice has now indicated that their investigation into the origins of the Russia collusion probe, or the Russia hoax, as I would call it, is now a criminal investigation. And this is why the Democrats are trying to impeach. Not only can they not beat the president in 2020, but they also know that his Justice Department is coming for them and their scandals. And it all started with the last meeting with the Italian Prime Minister, and William Barr and John Durham got to sit down with Italian intelligence officials, and that's when they broke the glass case. What do I mean by that? Adam Schiff, we know, was in contact with the initial whistleblower for a while. We know that he directed him to get an attorney. We know the attorneys, and even Donald Trump is now asking what happened to the other whistleblower. Maybe the whistleblower was Adam Schiff himself. Donald Trump is suggesting that now on Twitter, that maybe Adam Schiff himself was one of the whistleblowers, because now the Democrats are saying they don't need to hear a whistleblower testimony, by the way. That's according to reports that are out there now as well. We now see what they were doing. I see it crystal clear. They knew that William Barr and John Durham, the prosecuting attorney or the U.S. attorney from Connecticut, they knew he had met with Italy, and that's when they broke the glass case. In case of emergency, you break the glass case. This is what the Democrats do. They prepare these, then they leak it to the news media. And the problem with Adam Schiff was he was so mad at the DNI and the Inspector General because he didn't release it to the press the way it was supposed. It was leaked, and then the guy sat on it because he thought it was politically motivated. Remember all this? So we now have, this is Joshua Kaplan, the Department of Justice's sweeping review into the origins of its Trump-Russia probe has evolved into a criminal investigation. This according to the New York Times. So if true, it shows that Bill Barr is doing exactly his job. Following the facts, those who damaged America and broke the law to spread a hoax are going to face accountability. That's a quote from Congressman Mark Meadows. But don't expect the media to report it the way it should be reported. They're going to say that we're a banana republic. Trump's going after his political opponents. Well, you know what? We can't control the fact that his political opponents spied on him all during his campaign. We can't help that, okay? That's their fault. They're going to have to answer for it. The media, though, as I was coming in this morning, I kid you not, I was surprised. You know what? The media, Westwood One News, comes on the air, and they actually report William Barr has moved to a criminal investigation into the origins of the Russia probe. And then they cut to a piece of audio. And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to cut. And the audio they cut to is a Democrat listing the potential issues in each article of impeachment. And it was just mind-boggling.
And I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Lee to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China. I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Lee. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas,
The Communist Party has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leader stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program this morning. We have a special treat back with us. We have former U.S. Congressman Tom Tancredo, Republican from Colorado. He serves on the advisory board for We Build the Wall. You can go to webuildthewall.us. Congressman Tancredo, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. And how are you guys? It's a little snowy here.
Oh, really?
Chilly,
oh, no, not quite.
Oh, man.
We've had some fall temperatures here in Arkansas, but not quite any snow yet. But that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
This was the first one for this season, I think.
What can you tell us, real quick? Let's talk about some current news. Being from Colorado, this is actually perfect. The president saying last night that we're building a wall in Colorado. What was your take on that? Because the media obviously is like they're piling on, and it's like they're waiting for him to make any sort of mistake.
Oh yeah, exactly. How about? I don't think there was any that kind of reaction when Obama said that there were 58 states. He'd been in 57, one more to go, and thought Hawaii was in Asia. So, but anyway, when the Colorado, I wish we were building a wall to keep Californians out of Colorado. But unfortunately, I haven't seen that yet. And of course, I think he's talking about the fact that the Colorado River eventually dumps into the Rio, and so down along there somewhere, it may be happening. I'm not sure. I know when he talked about New Mexico, I know that We Build the Wall, which is a group I'm affiliated with, as you said, did complete our first section of the wall, going from the Rio Grande all the way up a mountain called Mount Cristo, and it's on the New Mexico side. It's actually where New Mexico, Mexico, and Texas meet. So that may be what he was referring to there. I hope so, because in fact, it's a great. I know I'm going to sound like him now when I say it's the greatest wall that's ever been built on the planet Earth.
Well,
it's the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, the president did come out this morning and say, kiddingly, this is his Twitter, kiddingly, we're building a wall in Colorado. Then I stated we're not building a wall in Kansas, but they get the benefit of the wall we're building on the border, referred to people in the very packed auditorium from Colorado and Kansas getting the benefit of the border wall. I mean, he's basically, I listened to the audio clip, but, it is what it is. But, I could see both sides to it. But, I mean, it's just, once again, the media, they got to find something to talk about, right? They got to find something to continue this Trump derangement syndrome.
Honestly, look at all the things that Obama, this brilliant, articulate, incredible human being, look at all of the things he flubbed on. I mean, I mentioned a couple, but don't forget he could not pronounce or did not know how to pronounce the word Corps, meaning the Army Corps of Engineers. He kept saying corpse when he was reading.
Yeah.
And, nobody said squat about that, right? I mean, I don't remember any big outcry. Of course, I made a few memes, but generally speaking, there was certainly no reaction, and there won't be whenever a Democrat does something stupid like that. Look at Biden, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Need we go farther?
Well, I mean, the Democrats in general, I mean, obviously we know there's a giant double standard here. I think it was this time last week, by the way, we're talking with former Colorado Congressman Tom Tancredo. I think it was this time last week, Tom, that they had this White House meeting between Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and President Trump. And President Trump triggered them. They were giving a Syria update, a Turkey update, and President Trump mentioned something about, some of the communist ideology coming out of that section of the Middle East. And he said, maybe you like that, Nancy. I don't know, because, the Democrat Party's full of socialists now. And apparently that triggered her, and she had a meltdown. And then, of course, she said that Trump had a meltdown. And I'm thinking, first of all, why is this news, I mean, I'm to the point now, it's like, okay, we get it. You guys don't like each other. You guys are completely opposite ends of the spectrum,
Well, it is amazing. And earlier this morning, I was just walking through, and unfortunately, the TV in the room that I was walking through was on MSNBC. I don't know why. It never was. But and the person that was giving the quote news was saying, well, there's a truce now in Syria and with the Turks, but the president said that this is a good thing. However, what he didn't say is, and I'm thinking, what? This is a news reporter? I mean, I didn't ask what he did. He didn't say a lot of things, probably. He didn't say, hey, there was snow in Colorado. Yes, but it's not your business in the news to tell me what he didn't say, tell me what he said, don't add anything to it, and go on if it's newsworthy.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I'm so sick of it, and I hope most Americans do that. You just don't pay any attention to it anymore. At least, certainly, I don't. And I think most people are like that, which is why his numbers are still so high, even after 3 years of constant 24/7 badgering and belittling by the major media outlets.
Speaking of the media outlets, there's all kinds of stories. Anytime the president mentions the wall, by the way, they try to say that he's not making good on his campaign promise. But if I go over to webuildthewall.us, you guys have, from what I can tell, the last time I've been on the site, it wasn't here. It's a border wall tracker, and you click on that, and you now have these maps where we see San Diego, Yuma, Tucson, El Paso, and they're color-coded where you can kind of really keep track of the construction that's going on the southern border. Isn't that right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And yes, it is true that many of the areas that are identified are places where there is some sort of barrier, but believe me, if you'd see what is there, you'd be hard-pressed to call it a barrier. Most of those areas they have something called Normandy barriers, which are those sort of X's, big things that are designed to keep cars from going over across the desert, but of course has nothing to do with the number of people walking right past it. I mean, it's that kind of thing where they're saying, well, it's not really new wall. Well, it really is, because the wall they're building is a true wall, and so there's a lot of it going on. It will continue to go on, and believe me, it needs to. It really is. It does really and truly work. It does prevent a lot of the, especially, I can tell you what happened where we built it in New Mexico along the border there, as I say. It cut off 19 different trails that were being used by the cartels to transport both drugs and people. And they are now having to go. I mean, I'm not telling you that, therefore, all of that stops. No, but they have to go now in an area. They get funneled into an area where it's much easier for the Border Patrol to actually interdict them.
Yes.
So, it's these things do work, and that's why lots of countries have them, and they work perfectly well. Israel, of course, being the one we always recruit.
Well, I mean, it really is something. I like this map. You guys even have the percentages complete. So, San Diego, you've got San Diego, 3 projects in San Diego, and they're under construction, 31% complete. El Centro, 16% complete. Then you've got Yuma, 18%. Tucson, 43. 20 miles in El Paso, totally complete. And you guys can check it out right now if you need to do this, folks, just so you can have some reference point about what's actually getting done. It's webuildthewall.us, and you just click on the border wall tracker. We're talking with former Congressman Tom Tancreda from Colorado. Now, Tom, there's a lot of people that say, to your point, on the left, they're going to say, most of the drugs and the fentanyl and everything else that we seize, a vast majority of it is at the checkpoints. It's at where we're actually. And I'm thinking, well, hang on a second. We don't know what we don't know. Isn't that such a phony argument? Because we've got this border that's wide open.
That's exactly right. I mean, what does it tell you? What does it tell any thinking person? That if you are interdicting thousands and thousands of pounds of narcotics and other contraband at the border, at the check station, what does it tell you about what's coming through the areas where there isn't a check station? I mean, it's so stupid. It's beyond belief. It is if everybody, the traffickers, the cartels, they get to the border, it's just a line on the sand. Nobody has any real idea in many places where the border actually even exists because there's nothing there to identify it. But somehow they know it, and they stop. And they go, oh, we can't cross here. We have to go to one of those ports of entry. I hope we don't get caught there. It's just ludicrous. But these people are ludicrous, especially when it comes to this issue. When you look at what's happening in Mexico, it is truly a narco state. things are going to get worse in terms of people trying to get out of there. And as long as there is a way for them to get out, I mean, there's not much incentive for the government there to make the changes that may be necessary, if they're even able to. Because right now, it is absolutely anarchy in many areas, and it's getting worse. We know what's happening in some of the areas where there's actually major, almost like World War II battles going on between the narcos and the military, and the military is losing them. I mean, these are major confrontations, hundreds of people, and so these things that are going on down there are going to cause even greater problems for us if we don't secure that border.
What do you think, real quick, and I know this is maybe not the issue that you're focused on a lot, but I mean, you definitely understand that the border's been your issue for a long time. You know, you wrote a book about it.
Indeed.
You know, and we've talked about that before. By the way, it's In Moral Danger, The Battle for America's Border and Security. This was back during the Bush era when you wrote this book. But, you know, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he's actually trying to tackle this. It's a very big issue. It's been an issue for a long time in America. He's finally doing something about it. And yet they're trying to impeach him for it, among other things. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts real quick, former Congressman Tom Tancredo, about this impeachment process that we're seeing play out in the media right now.
I'm telling you honestly that I believe a major part of this is the result of his position on immigration. And I'll tell you why. For decades, this country has been moving to the left. And it didn't matter if the Republicans were in charge or not. Sometimes it moved a little more slowly, sometimes quickly, but it always seemed to move that way, and so they all thought it was a done deal, essentially, that it was inexorable. And one of the things that they were counting on to move that process along, to change this country, to thoroughly transform it, as Obama said, into a socialist state, was massive immigration, both legal and illegal, of people who don't want to be American. This is a linchpin of progressive ideology. They have to have it. It's not just here. It's in Western Europe also. It is part of what they need to change America and the West, to move us away from the Constitution, the framers, Judeo-Christian values, move away from all of that. And I just cannot emphasize how important massive immigration from third world countries, people, low skill, low wage workers who will demand more and more from government. That is absolutely, it is, as I say, the linchpin. So yes, Trump's the first president who has ever attempted to reverse this process. And therefore, honest to goodness, I believe helps push this whole impeachment idea. They've got to get rid of him. They've got to go back to this leftward movement. He's the only thing that has stopped it. And so we have to do everything we can to help him stay where he is and be successful.
I completely agree, and I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, Congressman Tom Tancredo. Best of luck to you. Keep up the good work at WeBuildTheWall.us.
Thank you, sir. You too. Thanks for the megaphone. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Anytime. Folks, we're going to take a break. Back in just a moment. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
Of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology. And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to pick back up. If you haven't heard the news that Vice President Mike Pence gives a blistering speech against China yesterday in a stunning rebuke of Arkansas's economic development policy, trying to trust the communist Chinese and their so-called companies to move here into Arkansas. In a stunning rebuke, the vice president pointing out, from what I can tell, that our foreign policy in America under the Trump administration is vastly different. The vice president saying we cannot, pretend that China is who we want them to be. We have to accept them as they are. Here is Vice President Mike Pence. Let's pick it up at 24:35, Joe, talking about the Chinese government influencing not only corporations like the NBA, but local and state governments. Listen.
Influence across the region and across the world. As I said last year, the Chinese Communist Party is also continuing to reward and coerce American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials to influence the public debate here in America. Today, China is not only exporting hundreds of billions of dollars in unfairly traded goods to the United States, but lately, China has also been trying to export censorship, the hallmark of its regime, by exploiting corporate greed. Beijing is attempting to influence American public opinion, coercing corporate America. And far too many American multinational corporations have kowtowed to the lure of China's money and markets by muzzling not only criticism of the Chinese Communist Party, but even affirmative expressions of American values. Nike promotes itself as a so-called social justice champion. But when it comes to Hong Kong, it prefers checking its social conscience at the door. Nike stores in China actually removed their Houston Rockets merchandise from their shelves to join the Chinese government in protest against the Rockets general manager's 7-word tweet, which read, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." And some of the NBA's biggest players and owners who routinely exercise their freedom to criticize this country lose their voices when it comes to the freedom and rights of the people of China. In siding with the Chinese Communist Party and silencing free speech, the NBA is acting like a wholly owned subsidiary of that authoritarian regime. A progressive corporate culture that willfully ignores the abuse of human rights is not progressive, it is repressive.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely true.
When American corporations, professional sports, pro athletes embrace censorship, it's not just wrong, it's un-American.
Yes.
American corporations should stand up for American values here at home and around the world.
What should states do?
Beijing's economic and strategic actions.
Should states stand up for American values as well? Like, should the state of Arkansas stand up for American values? I'm just curious. You would think that we need to stand up for American values, right? I mean, do you remember back in 2015 when Governor Asa Hutchinson bailed on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and had it rewritten to appease corporate America? I mean, you know, so anxious to appease, right? So anxious to weigh in on the social norms, or the social problems. You had LGBT, RSTLNE, would you like to buy Val community? They were all down at the Capitol protesting, and the governor said, you know what? We need to tone back the Religious Freedom Restoration Act a little bit. They were all they were wrongly saying that this will allow bakers and florists to discriminate. Well, where's Asa now? I mean, now that the fact that Hong Kong's being oppressed, they're trying to take their freedoms away. Where's the governor now when it comes to, you know, these forced organ harvest? I mean, all I'm trying to say is the same standard and the same level of hypocrisy that you see out of NBA players that are willing to boycott the NBA All-Star game because it was held in North Carolina because North Carolina passed a bathroom bill that said men have to go in men's rooms and women have to go in women's rooms. The wokeness, you know, or whether it's the NFL taking a knee, which is their right to do in this country. But because of money, all of the sudden, hear no evil, see no evil. And that's exactly what's going on here in Arkansas. The communist Chinese government is promising that if we let them move here, they'll employ some of our citizens. So we're willing to, for the exact same reason as the NBA's agreed, we're willing to sell out American values and principles by putting our head in the sand. And if we're asked about it, like Mike Preston was asked about it by Roby Brock this weekend, well, I know, you know, we don't really believe, you know, Congressman Crawford's on the Intel Committee. He sees stuff we don't see, but we're perfectly confident that the companies coming here are not a national security threat. Oh, wow, okay. You admit that the guy has information you don't, but say it doesn't matter, they're not a national security threat. Or if you do get asked about it by the press, you put out the complete and total lie that these Chinese companies are investors just like anybody else in the Western world. Oh, well, you know, they're investors and they're looking at the marketplace and da-da-da-da-da. Folks, if the Chinese Communist government, if the Communist Party of China asks that business owner, if you want to call them that, to do something or to do X, what do you think they're going to do? I mean, literally, they are taking the Communist Party of China and they compartmentalize it. They call it a company, and we're just like, oh, they're a company like everybody else. Let's bring them here in America. Let's bring them in Arkansas. Let's give them taxpayer incentives. I mean, so when Congressman Rick Crawford said that we shouldn't trust China, when Congressman Rick Crawford came out and said it's a Trojan horse on this program, that's exactly what it is. Communist Party of China, let's call it Rui, or let's call it Sun Paper. That's your Trojan horse. And it's just galloping across the ocean, and we're just saying, hey, you know, we'll do it. We're for sale. Matter of fact, how are we for sale in this situation? That's another question. Because every other third world nation that does business with China, their politicians get bought off before anything happens. That's all the time we have. We'll have more on this on Monday. I'm sure there'll be more developments on this between now and Monday. Arkansas, thank you so much. Please go to the YouTube channel and click the subscribe button and the little bell for notifications. It's Conduit News. My name's Paul Harrell, Arkansas. Have a great weekend and be safe.